how implementing Profit First can really leverage the value of a business through growth in earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Essentially, some refer to it as free cash flow. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen and the PowerPoint, and we'll get going. So thank you again for joining us. We're going to cover a lot of material in 30 minutes, and hopefully we'll be able to cover it and have some time at the end for questions. So Kenny and Kenny, we're certified advanced Profit First coaches. We've been at it for coming up on 7 years, and we've made it a part of all of our business engagements because I think you'll see that it's a very simple and nice approach to cash flow, and it's in a business owner's best interest to place an approach like this. So with that, we're preparing this presentation and material for your benefit. We want you to use it. We just ask that you let us know that you're going to use it, and we're here to help you implement anything that you see in today's webinar or other ones that are of interest. Okay, so today we're going to cover 6 main things. The first one is the problem. Why most profitable businesses are cash strapped. And then the Profit First system or approach that helps business owners allocate to accounts and change their behavior so that they're less cash strapped. And then we're going to look at a 24-month transformation of a business, and we're going to go quarter by quarter and look at how that EBITDA number or free cash flow number evolves. Next, we're going to talk about tax strategy and eliminating tax surprises, and then look at the effects of implementing Profit First over a 24-month period with the growth of EBITDA and how that changes everything, including the multiples and ultimately the enterprise value. And finally, we'll finish with a 90-day action plan if you want to start in on Profit First. So the problem. In our example, we're going to look at $1 million business, and in some respects, according to statistics, you may say, well, it's a profitable business. In our example, they've got 50,000 of EBITDA, or a 5% EBITDA margin on $1 million. But what these numbers don't show is that the owner sometimes doesn't get paid, because when money's not there for payroll, the last one to get paid is the owner. And in this example, 95% of the revenue is consumed by operating expenses, not leaving a lot of room if there's a hiccup in cash flows. We handle a lot of group therapy practices that are taking insurance. So if there's a problem with insurance billing, and you've got a very thin margin of 5%, that could throw you in the negative very quickly. Next, without proper intention, oftentimes business owners are surprised by tax bills come April 15th. And then this continual payroll stress of making payroll and inconsistent cash flow. And really is most likely the result of operational leakage. Essentially, Northcote Parkinson said that demand rises to the level of supply. So if you've just got one operating account and all these expenses, there's money in the account, the expenses get paid without a second thought. And this is what causes operational leakage, where your cash flow is just eaten up by all of these expenses. So the root cause is really the traditional way of looking at profit. Going back to the traditional formula of revenue minus expenses equals profit. If you look, profit is the last item here, and it's what's left over. With Profit First, we're flipping that, and we're saying that when the revenue comes in, there's an allocation to profit, owner pay, tax, and operating expenses. So if you'll notice, operating expenses is the last item. So there's intention to make sure that there's always profit, the owner gets paid along with all the other employees, and there's money sitting in a tax account, so the IRS always gets paid, and then operating expenses. So this doesn't happen overnight. Essentially on $1 million business, these are the target allocations. If a business has never implemented Profit First, they've probably never received a profit distribution. So this 10% target takes a little time. And we'll get into kind of what a rollout looks like in a minute. But what this means is that whenever a deposit comes in, let's say our deposit for that week is $10,000, 10% is moved into a separate profit account. 10% is then moved into a separate owner pay account. 15% is moved into a separate tax reserve account. And what is left over, 65%, goes into the operating expense and constrains the other expenses. And what that does is it causes efficiencies indirectly, because if there's not money in the account to pay expenses, the owner has to get creative, and that is easier to take all these little inconveniences and create a pricing discipline and smarter spending over the course of the year. Looking at this graphically, what this might look like, and we'll get into some of the numbers, but you can see before Profit First, essentially the only allocation is really to owner's pay, which is 10%. But over time, quarter by quarter, we're growing profit and tax reserves. And so over the 2-year period, we're working into those targets and essentially becoming a mature business from a cash flow standpoint, achieving the Profit First targets. Now let's dig a little deeper and go in quarter by quarter, looking at the P&L and the evolution of the EBITDA growth. So, in the first year, we're looking to stop the bleeding. And so we're already, before Profit First, at a 5% EBITDA. And we're going to bump that up in that first quarter, only 3%. So we might we might allocate 1% to a profit account and 2% to a tax reserve account. And here we're just looking to create a little discipline and a little muscle memory in moving money to those accounts. In the second quarter, we're moving it up a little more. Mike likes to say that Rome wasn't built in a day. So you shouldn't expect to get to your targets if in your first quarter. And so this is a build-up process. This is kind of where, our experience comes to play in helping clients figure out how to essentially roll this out and achieve the ultimate targets. But we might bump it up. We might double that 1%, say, to 2%, and then bump up the tax allocation further. Now, we started with 5%, so we may, just kind of looking at this, we may have 5% go into the tax account, 3% to the profit account. Then we go, maybe we bump it up to 5% to the profit account, and then 7% to the tax account. And then we work through that in quarters 2 and 3. This isn't going to happen on its own. It's going to require some intention. So oftentimes there's some accounting cleanup just to make sure that you have the information to help make some of these decisions as far as cutting expenses or looking for alternatives to expenses, and tightening up collections. In some cases, you may even realize that some of your customers are not profitable customers. So they're actually costing your company more than they're delivering as far as profit. And so this is a process, and by the end of the first year, we're projecting that you're up to 15% of EBITDA of that million. So for that quarter, it works out to be 37,500. And if you look at annually, you've grown EBITDA from 50,000 pre-Profit First up to 117,500, and you're at a run rate of 15%, and owner pay remains at 10% or 100,000 on an annual basis. However, the big difference that you'll notice with Profit First is there's money sitting in an owner pay account, so the owner is always getting paid. Moving on to the second year, we roll into it at 15% EBITDA margin on an annual 150,000. We're continuing to improve profit through pricing and efficiencies. And then in quarter 7, we're able to do a better job of bringing on better customers and clients, levering the work that we did in the first year. We're improving our processes, and we're able to get the margin up to 20%. This 20% is split between the profit and the tax account. Remember, EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So this 20% probably looks like 15% to the tax account at this point, and 5% to the profit account. And then by the end of the second year, we're able to move up to 25%, 15% for the tax and 10% for the profit account, and EBITDA is at a run rate of 250,000 for the year. And essentially, over a 2-year period, we've been able to move the business to the profit first targets and grow the EBITDA from 50,000 to 250,000 on that same $1 million of revenue. So let's jump into the tax strategy, because this is big. The last thing you want as a business owner is a tax surprise. And with Profit First, you essentially eliminate that, because you're funding it with each deposit. So before Profit First, you had no dedicated tax reserve account, and you're just paying your taxes from your operating cash. Remember, I talked about Parkinson's law. Demand rises to the level of the resource. So by the time you're making your quarter estimates, there's no tax money available in that operating account. And so what happens is there's a big scramble for cash to make the estimated payments, and some of them get missed, which leads to penalties. And, unfortunately, your accountant probably has to deliver the bad news in April if you missed a couple of your estimated tax payments that, well, now they're all due. And now you've got late payment penalties on top of it. So with Profit First, it's substantially different and a much better tax experience, because with Profit First, remember, there's an allocation happening with each deposit, and you're moving money into a separate dedicated tax account. So it's funded with every deposit, and your estimates are funded potentially before the due date. Knowing that there's going to be money available to make those, you can schedule them at the start of the year to draft out of your tax reserve account. And so there's no surprises. And then you have visibility into your taxes each quarter, and you're able to do more tax planning and be less reactive. So substantially different experience for the owner, and it helps you make better financial decisions, lower potential for penalties. And when you're allocating to a tax reserve account, what it does is it eliminates the temptation or that Parkinson's law to use your tax money to pay operating expenses. So it becomes, your tax account becomes a resource, and this whole process of having money to pay your taxes leads to peace of mind and a nice ride, instead of an emergency scramble to get the money together to make your estimated tax payments. So here's the really fun part. By deploying Profit First, as we saw earlier, quarter by quarter, EBITDA is growing, and your cash is growing as well. Now we can look at how this impacts your company value. So as I mentioned, EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, and it's essentially the language of business valuations. Higher EBITDAs allow for greater return on investment for potential buyers, so they value consistent earnings and EBITDA growth. So before Profit First, we had 50,000 of EBITDA, which would justify a low multiple, say of 2 to 3 times EBITDA. because there's less cash available to pay the buyer back for a purchase on a business like this. And so the value in this example would be 150,000. By the end of the first year, we showed how we were able to grow that EBITDA to 117,500, and stabilize the cash flow. So even at that initial multiple, we've doubled the value of the business. And obviously, this business is more stable, able to absorb more with a 12 to 15% EBITDA margin as a percent of revenue than we started out at 5%. Moving on to the second year, by the middle of the year, we've got EBITDA of 15 to 20% by optimizing operations and deploying profit first. And so then maybe we justify a multiple of 3.5%, and our EBITDA growth has us at 175,000. So we've essentially 4x'd the value of the business in a year and a half by deploying profit first. And then by the end of the year, we hopefully are at the targets, which puts us at an EBITDA run rate of 25% or 250,000, which would justify a higher multiple. In this example, I'm using 4 times, but it could very easily be 5 times, because we're showing that it's well run, that there's cash created, and understand that revenue hasn't grown at all. Only the earnings of that revenue has grown. So by moving from 5% EBITDA to 25%, we've more than 6x'd the value of the company, and proven that it's a well-run business. Now, why does this justify greater multiples? Well, buyers pay for predictable cash flow, not potential. 25% EBITDA margin signals pricing power and operational discipline. Having to make do with what's in the OpEx, get rid of that operating account leakage. We've got a tax reserve account, so there should be no back tax issues. Taxes are paid timely each quarter. The owners paid with the other employees on a consistent basis, at a reasonable compensation level. Systems are in place to achieve profit first, and there's predictable, strong cash flow, showing that money's going into a profit account and a separate tax account. When it comes time to sell a business and the profit first is in place, creates a nice audit trail during due diligence to show that cash is moving to support the EBITDA in the valuation. So 5 times more EBITDA by deploying profit first, and 6 times more value or more by deploying profit first. And so if this resonates with you and you want to implement in your business, it could look like this in a 3-month window. Set up your profit first accounts, profit, owner pay, tax, and OpEx accounts, and start with some low allocations. If you want our help on it, we can provide you with some strategic input based on our experience. and then look at eliminating some of those expenses that are causing that OpEx leakage. So second month, move it up, like we've talked about earlier. Set that estimated tax payment up so that it drafts timely. And then in the third month, look at how you did and take your first profit distribution. So we're prioritizing profit. We've got a separate account for owner compensation so that the owner's always paid on time. And we've got tax reserves for easy funding and proactive planning. And our EBITDA margin is growing. And we're leveraging this idea of creating a discipline through constrained operating expenses. So we are at time, but I'll stick around for a few extra questions, and you can go to our website and schedule a meeting with us to see specifically how we can help you with this. But with that, I'm gonna stop sharing and open it up to some questions.
Tim, general question. When you work with business owners, what would you say are kind of some of the main roadblocks that they have from implementing, like whether it's self-sabotage or just what are some of the main things that you've seen business owners struggle with, and how might some level of coaching be helpful to get past some of those roadblocks?
Yeah, that's a great question. As you can imagine, anyone that watches this presentation that doesn't have profit first is going to say, wow, that's awesome. I want to implement profit first. The roadblock is they have all these years of bad habits. So how do you undo those? Well, there's a lot built into the system to leverage some of those habits and turn some of them that have been bad for them into good. And then with strategic input from Profit First professionals, hopefully we can come up with a realistic rollout plan and not discourage the owner, make sure that they do things like take their profit distributions so they get hooked on implementing Profit First. So great question. Strategic input goes a long way in this.
Thank
Great
you.
question. Anyone else?
Yeah, Tim, I was gonna ask, why is one of like the main business drivers EBITDA? Um, why not revenue or assets?
Oh, that's another great question. So so as we saw, just over that 24-month transformation, that revenue is no guarantee that there's profit. It's not even a guarantee that there's money available to pay taxes. So I think most business owners will go into a year saying, hey, I had $1 million in revenue last year. I want to bump it up 5%, or I want to bump it up 10% and raise my revenue to $1.1 million. Well, if they're not intentional about making a profit, that extra 100,000 of revenue could essentially mean nothing to the business, or it could further strain the business if they're taking on customers that are not profitable. With something like Profit First, it forces the owner to grow the right way.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Great question. Thanks.
Tim, I have a question too. Can you just kind of go over how much and how often they should be taking profit distributions and what they should use it on?
Okay, yeah, another really good question. So that should happen quarterly. So there should be a profit distribution every quarter, and the the amount that's distributed is 50% of whatever has been allocated to that profit account. So what this does is this creates like a rush. I mean, think of a business owner that has never received a profit distribution. They receive their first distribution. It's essentially like a rush, even if it's a small amount. When we started out, we were only allocating 1%. So if it's not much, just the act of getting something is gonna help them develop motivation to continue on with the profit first discipline. Now, as you saw, we're growing our allocations to the profit account and the tax account over those 24 months. And so the amount that's in that profit account each quarter is growing, and we're only distributing 50%. So theoretically, even if it was constant, the profit distributions would grow. So that creates an even greater excitement as those distributions happen throughout the year. Does that answer your question?
Yep, that was perfect.
Awesome. Awesome. Any final questions?
Tim, on the tax allocation, do you just automatically use 10% or do you forecast, what it's gonna be and then net marginal rate or whatever, you use that to go into the tax reserve account, or how do you come up with the number?
So it's interesting, but taxes are always at 15% of revenue. Now, if you're new to deploying profit first, you start low and work up to the 15%. That money, especially with the current tax bill, and if you were in any of our Big Beautiful Bill webinars, you'd know that our tax rates are historically low. So that probably creates a surplus in the account, meaning that the actual taxes are going to be less than that 15%. It's a good problem to have. At the end of the year, if that plays out, that's just extra for the profit distribution. So does that answer your question?
Yes, so regardless of the rate you use, the important thing is to allocate some amount of money there because of what you said at the beginning of this webinar, that demand rises to the level of supply. So by allocating some, you're developing that habit to put away money in the various reserve accounts, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, another way to look at it is no one likes a tax bill, but when you get a tax bill without money to pay it, that's the worst. So
what about using, another question, lines of credit? How does that factor in? Is that a wise thing for owners to have a line of credit to take care of the shortfall? They've got bills that come due, but they didn't collect on the receivables that at the
so with Profit First, you shouldn't need a line of credit. If you're at that target level, you won't need a line of credit. That's a beautiful thing. Now there is a pre-profit first period, and so a lot of times businesses start implementing profit first with debt on the books with a line of credit balance. We're gonna use those quarterly profit distributions that I talked about earlier to eradicate that debt. And what we're gonna do in most cases is we'll take 90% of that distribution and pay down the balance on that debt. So over time, we'll eliminate that, and then by achieving the targets, you won't need it as a business.